So now that we have ourselves the patch, 4 patches worth of Amphorius and the Remembrance Path, I think it's safe to say nobody knows what the is going on with this path anymore, I guess. Because what started out as, you know, a path focused on Mimo sprites, right? A path focused on some, which I guess it technically still is, but that is not their fundamental usage as a character, right? So if you were to say all of them have Mimo sprites, well, that is true. Their fundamental usage, like their core, their purpose in life, they ultimately still fill a role similar to before Remembrance Path even existed. So for example, if you were to tell me Hia was gonna be an abundance healer with or without this whole Mimo sprite thing, okay, first of all, Ika is just fantastic, but you know, Tobas with Nami is still a thing, so I don't see why they can't just make that into so for example, let's just say we have a unit called Ika and Hyacine, and she was a wind abundance unit. I don't think anybody would even give a damn, because that's literally what she does. She keeps her team alive, and then if you have the right conditions, Ika will deal like quite a decent amount of damage, right? And then the same thing for like your Aglaia, your Casteris, right? Your basically Remembrance DPS. If you were to change their names into, I guess Aglaia could be like a destruction, sort of, right? Because it's a 3 targeting the joint attack. Casteris could technically be erudition, because the dragon and the enhanced weapon is like 5 targets and above. So if you were to change them into these 2 like paths, does it really matter if whether or not they even have Remembrance their name? Because last time I checked, it doesn't. You know, there's no fundamental main objective as to why would you even have this whole Mimo sprite archetype anyways, to have like unique interactions, aside from, I guess, the relic effects, right? The relic effects to work with like the keyword Mimo sprites or some unique characters. I want to say Sunday, but like, let's just be okay. Sunday would have worked with Aglaia with or without Mimo sprites, because bro literally works with Jingyuan. And Lion Lord is not a Mimo sprite, right? Ling Sha's Fu Yuan is not a Mimo sprite. So he could have literally just worked with Aglaia exactly 1-to-1 and just call her like a lightning destruction unit. It would have been like exactly the same. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, let's see. So was the Remembrance Path truly useless?
Hyacine's release as the next Remembrance Path character now means that Remembrance officially has more limited 5 stars than Preservation. That's really depressing, honestly. The release also marks another important milestone in that we now have Remembrance units dedicated to damage dealing, damage buffing, and healing, covering all the major roles. That subsequently begs the question, what was even the point? When Remembrance was first revealed in Aglaia's Drip marketing to be Star Rail's 8th playable path, the first ever added post-launch after 630 days of the game being out, I was equal parts excited and confused. Of course, brand new content to change up the feel of gameplay will always be welcome, but I was really curious how a new categorization of characters could possibly exist outside of these 7 initial paths, which seemingly covered every possible character archetype. 3 offensive paths to represent each of the major attack patterns, 2 damage amplifying paths which diverge on focusing on teammates or enemies, and 2 defensive paths for healing and shielding. Well, now that we've had Remembrance in the game for a while, it was undoubtedly successful in its goal to diversify gameplay, but in terms of design, some of the game's well-defined tight-knit structure was lost in the process, because it just doesn't fit in the same with the other paths. Its characters are made distinct not by having a specific role within team compositions, but solely by the existence of memo sprites as summonable units that are treated as additional allies. Initially, I felt that the decision to add an entirely new path was justified by its complex gameplay, but now that the novelty is worn off, Remembrance didn't really have to exist. Let's explore why, and also the implications that likely convinced Hoyo to make such a move to begin with.
If they made Remembrance back in the old SU, I'm not sure if you guys remember back in those days. Maybe you guys just picked up HSR like last week because you want to play Fate Collab, or you picked it up because of the Enforced patch. Back in my days, right? Back in my days, SU Remembrance Path, it was actually have nothing to do with summons, right? SU Remembrance Path back in my days, it was all about like freezing. It was all about like restricting the enemy movement. And like frankly speaking, if they made it as this case, like a mechanic that can like restrict enemy movements, I think that would have been quite interesting as well. Or at least like, you know for a fact that all these units, they will be doing something quite unique in which none of the other units so far has managed that well. Because even for like Ice DPS, right? Like your Ice units, like your Pepela, your Jingliu, none of them really make use of the ice mechanic or like the freeze mechanic that much. To a certain extent, I guess you have like Welt, Because Welt is like, I guess, the only guy that has like global like restrict and imprison. And maybe we can have like a Welt outer, and then you change his power to like a Remembrance Welt, right? Which I guess is sort of like fitting for the lore because like he's the original guy of Honkai Battery. But like, yeah, if they actually made Remembrance Path like a brand new class that had a whole new purpose, all right? A whole new core, a new role, aside from the same DPS support sustain, that could have been quite nice. So like a third class of supports. Because right now, we have one class of support, which is like Harmony, which is like your buffs. And then one class of support, which is your Nihility, which is like your debuffs. We could have gotten like another support class that is Remembrance, but they focus on like restricting enemy movements. Like if you play Epic 7, it's like bind and like restrict. And like you prevent them from getting action value and you don't let them get speed up. Or like some kind of this similar mechanics, which I think it will actually bring a lot more to the table compared to essentially like the same three things in the major team building competition. Like you don't even change that much for team building anyways. They're all serving the same shit, right? It's the same volume. So
keep the discussion fair, I feel like I should first make a point out of how the path system has always been a little inconsistent. Destruction is a good example of how design choices that seemed good initially can quickly lose their purpose over time, whether it be intentionally due to the devs changing their minds, or unintentionally because not every designer will be on the same page. The in-game description still reads as, deals outstanding amounts of damage and possesses great survivability, suitable for various combat scenarios.
Outstanding amounts of damage, shit. Outstanding. Wait, I'm actually curious now. Wait, I'm kind of curious now. What do the powers say again? Outstanding damage. That's a very, very specific keyword. Wait, hold on. I'm pulling up HSR to see what's up. Remarkable amounts of multi-target damage. Main damage dealer against groups of enemies. Remarkable, right? Outstanding damage and possesses great survivability. Suitable for various combat scenarios. Extraordinary amounts of single target damage. Main damage dealer against elite enemies. Extraordinary, chat. Oh my god, I actually never really noticed like what the words say like until to this day, right? Applies buffs to improve the team's combat. I feel like this. Oh, team's combat capacities. I never thought this was capabilities and was like a fucking typo. But okay, combat capacities, right? Okay, cool. Applies debuffs to reduce their combat capacity. I think that's also pretty fair. Although at this point, you might as well just say like, you know, crit DPS as well, right? Okay, very good. Possesses powerful defensive abilities to protect allies in various ways. Heals allies and restores HP to the team. What? It's literally the same exact fucking thing. What are you even saying? Heals allies and restore. Okay, if it doesn't restore HP, then what? Restores MP? Bro wants to be like pre-beta like Soraka. Also, we might as well just add on deals remarkable. Deals decent damage, right? This one we just add on also deals decent damage from my link shot and highs at this point, right? Alright, what's Remembrance? Possesses the ability to summon a Mimo sprite with special abilities to fight alongside the team in battle. Special abilities. Notice how they never said for which scenarios anymore. Especially for like DPS. You see like the destruction, erudition, hunt, right? They sort of like the main damage dealer for groups, the main damage against elites, and suitable for various combat scenarios. And then for Remembrance is like, yeah, we summon a Fatty Bomb with special abilities. Figure it out. So yeah, very, very interesting little path over here, right? Okay, let me mute this and we can get back to the view.
The first and last parts are accurate for sure, as they're all clearly designed as damage dealers, and the wide variance in how they target enemies makes them relatively flexible. The survivability part is where it starts to come off as an outdated generalization. Sure, counter-attackers like Yunli, Clara, and Blade live up to this statement very well, and plenty have minor forms of survivability with self-healing or built-in effect resistance, but others like Misha and Shui Yi don't have anything of that sort. They're only in destruction because they're damage dealers who aren't single target focused enough for the hunt and not spread out enough for erudition. I'd even go as far as to say their defensive stats are on the low end, which kind of goes at odds with destruction having having the second highest chance of receiving an enemy attack. Having a pseudo tank on the team or even double sustain seemed to be intended against harder hitting enemies a couple years ago, but sustains got power crept by stronger sustains to the point where running just one is good enough to keep the team alive while also maximizing DPS, so having a tanky destruction unit just isn't something that's necessary. Acheron is another.
It's like, I always say this like back then, right? Like, why would you want a top laner when the entire focus of this game is like running it down to the 1v1s? Like, you never want a bruiser archetype, or at least not yet in this place, because you don't really gain any purpose from having the additional bulk. Since your destruction unit's additional bulk, right, the additional like defensive capabilities, you are gonna supplement that with a sustain anyways, because most players in HSR, you are all running sustains. Unless you want to specifically run sustainers, but even if you do run sustainers with destruction, you notice how a lot of these destruction units just completely collapse. So for example, if you don't run a sustain with Blade and he doesn't get enough heals, he's cooked. If you don't run a sustain with Mighty and he uses up to 3 lives, he's cooked, right? If you don't run a sustain with Firefly, I guess that works, but it's more so because of Subric. And the other side of the coin of knowing sustainers is not because your DPS of being destruction is like they're bruisers, right? They're tanking damage. It's more so like, can you deal enough damage as the entire team to kill the enemy before they kill you? Because even if the bruiser is tanky, right? Even if your bruiser can survive, it's not like 1v1 top lane. You still have to cover your asses for your jungle and your support, your mid lane, all in the same team, because everyone in this team is getting targeted. So it doesn't matter if the destruction guy is the last one standing, unless your name is Mighty and he just 1v10s. If your other 3 units dies before that destruction unit falls, the run is also most likely over. So the easiest fix to this is simply just by having a sustain. And if you're going to be covering a sustain, which can keep pretty much any unit, any team combinations are alive for the most part, unless you have skill issue or like, you know, you're just like super underdeveloped, there is just really no inherent benefits to running a DPS with the built-in defensive capabilities. So at this point, the only niche for destruction is like you have the main targeting with +2 adjacent. That is pretty much it. Right, that's all they have there, which is the 3 target.
As a Nihility character who doesn't actually have a single debuff in her base kit, since her marks are considered as an other effect. Sure, her light cone can apply its own debuff to generate Acheron extra ultimate stacks, a little shameless if you ask me, but based on her lore as an emanator of Nihility and her synergy with other Nihility characters, it's understandable that she isn't destruction or erudition. Similarly, Fugue is a Nihility character that suspiciously plays like a Harmony unit, especially with her single target ally skill, but she still has debuffs in her kit, so Nihility isn't exactly wrong.
Okay, hear me out. If you gave Fugue Harmony, you are gonna have this light cone called Dance Dance. Dance alone is fine, right? Okay, sure, we have a Dance. It's great, you know, because last time we had Dance with Harmony Trailblazer. You know what I'm saying? So whether or not Fugue has Harmony with no Dance, honestly, it shouldn't really change that much anyways. And then you unlock the E2. So can you imagine like E2 Fugue on Harmony? Bro, that's built in 48% action value. If you slap that in with Harmony, MC, and Run Mei, that's 96% action value, chat. That's almost equivalent to an entire Barbin ultimate. So honestly, I feel like, you know, they're not making Harmony.
Preservation has tons of problems that I went over in a separate video. And to be honest, I can't believe we still don't have any after so much time has passed, but it shows that Hoyo doesn't exactly feel the need to treat all the paths equally. Perhaps it's because it's always left room for flexibility that the devs felt it wasn't a big deal to break our preconceived notions about the limits of the system by adding Remembrance. Now, when it comes to the gameplay of Remembrance, Memo Sprites are undeniably unique, with each having separate abilities on top of being a summonable ally that can be targeted and has its own health pool. We've seen multiple new mechanics and interactions spawn as a result, like joint attacks, more HP contributed to the team's total, and new special gauges. But none of that particularly warrants the need to make a new path. Each of the current Remembrance characters we have could have easily fit right in with the existing ones despite their unique mechanics, in the same way that the previously existing summoners of Jinyuan, Topaz, and Lingsha all have different paths while maintaining that overlap. And it's not like Remembrance characters build differently, as just like any other archetype, they have specialized equipment, but can still make use of mostly any set since Memo Sprites inherit stats from their own.
Okay, so to summarize, is to sell farming brand new artifact sets, as well as to sell brand new light codes. Yeah, that's pretty
owners. So what truly separates Memo Sprites from any previous gameplay archetype is the significant amount of work it took to redesign and recode combat systems that have been in place for years at this point. I want to remind you that whatever mechanical overhauls they did before 3.0 was responsible for breaking one of Aventure's paths.
Whoa!
In particular,
Whoa!
I
Didn't
can
even see
appreciate
that.
the separate stats page and model viewer for Memo Sprites. Would have been cool if they went back and did it for the other summons, which makes each kit much more presentable, especially with Remembrance characters inherently introducing a lot of text to explain their abilities. And so to justify the higher cost and cash in on that effort, it makes sense that Remembrance was made into a marketing push. I mean, if you ask me, advertising an 8th playable path is a whole lot more eye-catching than we made summons more fleshed out. I don't think anyone would have had a problem with Remembrance if not for its implications with regards to light cones, whose bonus effects are only active when equipped to characters of the corresponding path. Signatures have always been notoriously specific and hard to use on characters other than the intended one, but this issue is a little bit different. So we've already had things like nihility cones with DOT effects that are pretty useless on units who don't have DOTs to apply, and when Break became an actual team in version 2 thanks to Super Break, they made sure that every path had a 4-star light cone with break effect, except for preservation because screw those guys, I guess. So there would have been absolutely no issues making Memo Sprite related light cones for the original paths if Remembrance had never existed. But because they made it a thing, players no longer had a backlog of fully upgraded cones that they could use to instantly build their new.
This guy only has 2 S5 DDDs. Holy shit. Is that normal? Bro, how many S5 DDDs y'all have? 1, 0, 1. S3 plus S4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I don't know, man. Are you guys just like not pulling, right? Like, I just don't really know what's going on, you know?
New units, which was definitely quite annoying. We did receive victory in a blink through the 3.0 Amphoria story, which was nice, though it's clearly insurance for free-to-plays to actually have at least a single usable cone for their Remembrance Trailblazers. Because while you can get the 2 3-star options from the gacha, their stats are terrible and their passive effects are not great. It especially wasn't a good look when Aglaya was released in the second half of 3.0, yet the free 5-star Remembrance cone wasn't added until 3.1's Divergent Universe expansion. This meant that if you wanted to run Remembrance Trailblazer and Aglaya at the same time with light cone effects, even on separate teams, you'd either have to resort to 3-star, roll for her signature, or buy the battle pass, which is what I ended up doing.
Wait, they didn't include a Memory of Chaos? Did they not include the Memory of Chaos path? Like Victory in the Blink? Was that after Aglaya? Oh, Victory in the Blink was after Aglaya? Wait, did S? I can't remember. Yeah, Victory in the Blink, it was in Memory of Chaos shop. I thought they instantly added it at the start of version 3. Because that was when they introduced the path, right? It was, yeah, exactly. Like the moment version 3 came out, you could have just bought Victory in the Blink in the MOC shop. Yeah, I'm not talking about Herda store. I'm talking about the MOC shop. Because they always update the MOC shop, like huge updates. They basically changed the whole war. It was okay, so it was there then. It was there. Okay. Yeah.
I 100% would not have bought it if not for Remembrance, and I'm sure plenty of others were in the same situation. Star Rail characters all have unique stat demands, especially now more than ever, so having such a limited pool of light cones to choose from ends up being really restrictive. Casters, for example, really wants a high max HP stat not only for her damage healing, but because it allows her to charge her ultimate faster. Well, her signature grants her a giant 30% max HP at Super Ramp position 1, but no other Remembrance cone grants it. The 2.6 event light cone would have been absolutely perfect for her, giving 24% max HP and 36% crit damage, but she can't use the passive because it's for destruction characters only. I recognize that this problem is only going to be less severe as time goes on, since we should have more 4-star light cone options to choose from later on.
Yeah, and then we get a new path after that. Wait, we're getting a new path, right? I heard we're getting a new path. Like another path after that. So what if we just have like 2 new paths every version? Shit. You know?
Including more free ones, but it's still a very tangible downside to adding a new path should they choose to do it again in the future. They definitely made some money off of it, but it's also not that far off from their typical business practices. Another effect of adding new paths is that there will be overall less unit synergies in the game. For example, Anaxa wants to have another erudition character to fulfill his 4th Ascension passive, but a remembrance character won't activate it even if they play similarly to other erudition units. This also applies to the Herda, Acheron, and any future units who have similar mechanics. Pretty much a complete negative, as it'll make it a bit less likely for small niches to pop up, like with how Serval got an uptick in usability as a supporter for Herda. I suppose we still can have other character-specific mechanics which might achieve similar effects down the line, but I'd cite this as an example of how keeping things concise and structured would probably be better in the long run. It'll now be slightly more difficult to understand a character's role at a quick glance, and new players will have an extra thing to have to learn about, but I suppose for a majority of players it won't make that much of a difference anyway. I do think there is at least one objectively good part about an 8th path being added, both in the short term and long term, and it's that more possibilities are open for the Trailblazer. Starrail hasn't foreshadowed exactly how many major storylines we'll get in the future, but it wouldn't have been a crazy assumption to think we'd get 7 planets and 1 new Trailblazer path on each. But now that we can get more planets without having to compromise on this, and it's also perfect because the Trailblazer makes for a great conduit to introduce new paths and their mechanics. It's a guaranteed free-to-play unit. The recent incarnations have been really well designed and useful in the endgame despite being free, and them being good also serves as strong incentive for players to interact with the new area's progression system. With Amphorius, I specifically made sure to do the exploration tasks so that I could immediately get max Eidolons on my Remembrance Trailblazer, which is something I'd typically put off for months. Not to mention, Remembrance Trailblazer very much plays like a Harmony character with their true damage buffs, but Penacony just gave us the actual Harmony Trailblazer not too long ago, so this was a convenient workaround for them. I really like that the protagonist is kept relevant in both story and gameplay, so this is a nice thing for them to have going forward. In my opinion, Remembrance shouldn't have become its own path, but I also understand why it was made to be the way it is. And
they could have made it a new path. I feel like making a new path is fine though. It's just that the alternatives, especially at the start, I think it's just a little bit way too restrictive. Specifically like the light cones, right? The light cones. Because having a new path with like no brand new light cones, or like very, very little alternatives, or like even if you have the alternatives, they all want that specific effect, which is tied up to the limited rate up artifact. Oh my god, artifact, oh my god, I actually have E7. Oh yeah, for example, Castris, right? Like even though Castris, she released by like 3.2, so there's really been like 3 versions after Remembrance Path was introduced. So you technically have the Battle Pass, you have the 3.1, the Herda Store, you have your Remember. But it is none of those light cones gave you max HP. Like quite literally, if I were to go look at it right now, I believe every single Remembrance Path light cone, they scale with attack, if I'm not mistaken. Speed. Well, okay, this is the limited light cone. So this is crit rate plus crit damage. So this is the only one that's more universal, which is gonna be the battle pass. And then this one is gonna be with attack. And then this one is pretty much gonna be the one that, you know, sort of like a support-ish. And then all of the 3 stars, I think they are just like giga code. Like the 3 stars legitimately serve no purpose. Back in my days, we had people using like coggers. Right? We have coggers, we have like what was the other one again? I believe we have like the pass key, right? I think pass key was pretty good. I think some people even use the chorus on Babin, like literally with like nothing else to use, like the attack buff. But yeah, if we have like more alternatives to like building up these units outside from the light cone restrictions, I think the whole Remembrance Path thing would have been nice. And the limitations when it comes to team building, right? Like for example, your D Herda requiring erudition units and your Acheron requiring nihility units, I think it's not the worst thing considering they're both like emanators of that specific path, which I mean they technically ties up to the law, right? Because this is the emanator of erudition and the same thing for Acheron. But it would be a little bit annoying if they start to introduce these keywords outside from like these kind of like, I guess like lore accurate kits, because if they keep adding more and more paths, it sort of opens up team building while not opening up team building at the same time. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. It's like you are at the same time having more options to build different teams, because now you can make use of these other units from other classes, which means that, okay, now that I need to use like whatever class it is, I would then use these units in situations that I wouldn't use them. Like for example, Serval probably wouldn't see play that much, but because, you know, she works at this erudition path, you're going to see a little bit more play. But at the same time, it also flips the issue of, oh, now I actually need to use these units on the same path. If I don't, it's like you're cooked. So it's a little bit like a double-edged sword where it opens up more team building options, but also making it a little bit more restrictive at the same time. I guess like another parallel I can draw is like if they want to make a content catered to a specific team. So like for example, Pure Fission, right? You know, Pure Fission is gonna be a way to introduce a way for these kind of like erudition units to shine. Because Herda shines very well, 3B shines very well. Essentially, if you're an AoE unit, you will have more performance in Pure Fission than other game modes. Technically, it's good because it diversifies your team building, but technically it might also be bad because some players just don't even have access to the AoE team DPS options. But it's not as prevalent for these because we have accessibility to free-to-play options. Because everybody has a baby Herda, right? Everybody has a baby Herda. Technically, if you want to, you can get Himiko for free $99. And a lot of these supports, as long as you have that free DPS as a core, it can work. Because supports, being like, you know, Team Impala, it can still sort of work with these alternatives. So I think like all these issues coming out with like Remembrance Path and whether or not they should be added in the new thing, it ultimately really just depends on the fact that how are the accessibility and like how can players make use of these new mechanics, these new interactions, these new team building without actually having access to all of the rate up units. So if you are a Casualist user and you didn't pull for Casualist Signature Lycone, do I really have to use a Bailu Signature Lycone? Like what's wrong with running like my the 4-star or the 3-star one, right? Like it shouldn't be like more than a 30% damage drop off. You could say it might be, you know, it might not be as relevant because Casualist now is very, very strong. Like, I think an excellent example, right, that people probably say is, okay, even at E0, S0, Casualist can 0-cycle Pollux. Sure, because Pollux was made with Casualist in mind. But what about afterwards? What about MOC 12, 1 patch, 2 patch, 10 patch later, and you pull for Casualist? By the time that rolls around, if you still don't have alternatives, and you're still fucking running like your 3-star or like the fucking random ass 4-star Lycone without an S1, that is a problem. Right, so for now, it might not be the worst it is since we are in the shield environment. I think going forward, just by a very easy fix is just to introduce alternatives, right? The more alternatives they introduce, the more flexibility is going to become. So like Akron, I think they introduced the alternative to Akron Signature Lycone with the Boundless Choreo. The Sesbian Lex Lycone, which honestly I think the art was like really, really good. What is the name again? I think it's Boundless Choreo, right? Where is the... Yeah, okay, yeah, this one. Alright, so technically this was introduced after Akron came out, which is after the S1. And after a couple of while, they actually introduced it, which is a very, very decent alternative with crit rate and crit damage. Unfortunately, it is still not going to be as good as S1 because you can't gain a stack generation. But I would say it is a definitive upgrade compared to, for example, Good and Stewell. So, yeah, we'll just see how this is going to be going forward. But I think overall... The consensus are definitely there. I think Remembrance Path, the idea is G, but like the execution, more accessibility.
Well, it did introduce some inconveniences. Overall, I don't think it's had that negative of an effect on the game to earnestly complain about
for
it.
Now.
The only question left now is, will there be a 9th? If there's anything I've learned by this point, is that the Star Rail devs constantly break their own.
Wait, bro, I swear they already said we are going to be adding 2 new paths. Like, they literally said it like since like 2 or 3 patches back. We are adding 2 new paths like this year. Is that not what they said? I swear there's another path.
Just because we got an 8th path doesn't mean a 9th is coming anytime soon. In fact, I'd say there's a chance it never gets added at all.
Am I schizoing?
Version 1 had a 4-star in every patch. And now we're looking at 5 patches in version 3 without 1, so clearly established practices mean nothing to them. I hope you found this video to be interesting or insightful. Subscribe for more Honkai Star Rail discussion videos, and as always, thanks for watching.
Absolutely right. WW video is does Remembrance Path. Remembrance serves 0 purpose. Remembrance serves 0 purpose. A very, very good video. Very, very nice. Word of the day is 0. Join Twitch, join Discord, join all the best. I can see you guys now. Use code both of them as no use code.